There are very few watches that I would describe as a love letter to a movie. However, this right here is one of them. Hayao Miyazaki released Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, which was a movie that would become one of his most important works of his career. And while Nausicaa technically wasn't a Studio Ghibli film, its success helped lay the groundwork for the studio that would go on to create some of the most beloved animated films of all time. And 40 years after Nausicaa was released, Seiko created a watch to celebrate the movie that would help make all of this possible. This is the Seiko SPB437. Before we talk about the watch, we need to talk about Nausicaa. In 1984, this man, Hayao Miyazaki, created the film Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind from one of his mangas that he created a year earlier. At this point, Miyazaki wasn't yet the household name that he is today. There was no Studio Ghibli. There was no Totoro. There was no Spirited Away. And there was no Princess Mononoke. Nausicaa came first. And the film was a massive success, and its popularity helped Miyazaki, Isao Takahata, and Toshio Suzuki establish Studio Ghibli in the following year. So while Nausicaa technically wasn't a Studio Ghibli film, it is impossible to talk about the history of Ghibli without talking about this movie right here. And that's what makes this watch so interesting, because Seiko isn't simply celebrating an anime in general. Seiko is celebrating the movie that helped start all of this. Alrighty, now on to the unboxing. So this is the outer box it comes in, but the real star of the show is on the inside. Let's get it out here. Throw that off to the side. So this is a Seiko Presage. And it comes in this like navy box. It has this like soft touch kind of exterior to it. And when you open it up, you're greeted by this like postcard, which has Princess Nausicaa right on there. As you can see, Studio Ghibli 1984. And then when you open it up, it has this like artwork from the movie, which kind of goes in detail of like the main story, but like also the prophecy associated with the story. And then on the back, you get a message from Hayao Miyazaki, which when translated says, "Let's live without being bound by time." So I think this is such a cool addition. You're not really going to do much with this piece of paper, but it's just really cool to have. And then there's the watch itself. So here it is. We'll go more into detail with this later. But this box is actually very special. It's got this like wood grain interior, and then it has this like silver foil finish to it, which is one of the opening scenes of the movie where Nausicaa is like in the woods getting samples and specimens. And I don't know, it's just really cool to look at and like have on your desk as like a decoration. So that's the box. Alrighty, now onto the actual watch here. So I would describe the dial as having this like pure blue enamel, and it's really reminiscent of the blue clothing worn by Nausicaa in the movie. So on here, you can kind of see the emblem at the bottom, right here, and then the blue of her dress. And I've had this watch for a little while now, and I can confidently say that this is quite possibly one of the most striking dials I've ever seen or handled in person. And I've owned quite a few watches with amazing dials. Two that come to mind are like the Grand Seiko Winter Taisetsu or the Seiko Alpinist Ginza. But this dial genuinely just has something different going on. It's hard to explain, but depending on the light condition, like the dial can appear almost like a inky black, or you move your wrist and then suddenly it's this like deep navy blue color, or in brighter light during the day, it can appear almost like a royal blue, and it really pops. And sometimes there's even almost like this like indigo purpley color that comes out. And the frustrating thing is that I don't think cameras can really capture or do this watch justice. Like, I'm trying to move it around here and show you sort of the difference in the colors, but it really can't do it justice. It's one of those dials that I find myself constantly just staring at because it's so mesmerizing to look at, and I think the rest of the dial design just really complements the color. You have these white hour indices going around the peripheral of the watch, and then you have these sword style, very glossy hour and minute hands, and I think that these little details to the watch kind of make it feel like an aviation watch, which is perfectly in tune with sort of the story and what Nausicaa does throughout the movie. I mean, she spends so much of her time flying on her like winged glider, which is similar to these hour hands, and piloting aircrafts and just flying throughout the sky trying to save the world. So even without like putting a picture of Nausicaa herself, right, the character, onto the dial, this watch and the dial itself really just communicates this hard to explain feeling that the movie invokes. So that's the dial. Alrighty, on to the case. So I'll list the dimensions off to the side here, but this watch has a 40.5 millimeter diameter, 12.4 millimeter thickness, 47.8 millimeter lug to lug, and a 20 millimeter lug width for the straps. And I've got to say, I think 40.5 millimeters is way too big for the diameter, especially for this kind of watch. This kind of vintage-inspired, almost field watch is meant to resemble the tools used throughout the movie. And I think it would have been much better suited to a 36 to 38 millimeter size. But overall, I like what they did with the case. Most bead blast finishes that I've had the chance to own or to look at sort of have this like cheap feeling to it, except because of the correlation to the movie and just the overall way they finished it, it makes this watch feel purposeful and less like an afterthought or a cost-saving measure. It gives it a very rugged and utilitarian character. And because the watch isn't polished or it doesn't have very like sharp finishing, it's more rounded, your attention gets pulled more to the dial, which I think really is the star of the show. In addition to just the overall bead blast case finishing, this watch comes with a very, very big crown. I don't know if you can see that there, but this crown is huge. And it has this blue, like, center gem into it, which is very reminiscent of a part of the movie. The, I guess, monsters, or whatever you want to call them, are called ohms. And it looks like the ohm's eyes, which is super cool, I think. But the big crown makes it so much easier to wind and to set the time on the watch. And it's just one of those things that you don't really think about when you're buying it, but you notice it so much when you're actually using it day to day. And now let's talk about the case back. Honestly, I really did not like this case back. I was like, why is it gold? It just looks so out of place compared to the like dark gray, almost titanium looking finish. But then I watched the movie and it just made so much more sense. Everything about the case back here is an Easter egg in a way to the things that happen in the movie and just what the movie stands for. So the case back itself references a quote in the movie. Let's see if I can get it here. Clothed in robes, descending onto a golden field. And it's one of those things where it's referenced throughout the whole movie, and it's just something you don't forget after you watch it once. And it's so cool just to have that like inscribed onto the case back here. And then you have like the ending scene of the movie covering the exhibition case back with some like natural sprouting and stuff. And then you also have the number. So this is number 596 out of 1,500. And then you have like the movement, where it's made, Seiko, all of that. But this is honestly the coolest part to me, just with all the movie references and just how attentive to the details they were, even with the color of the case back, and matching the prophecy foretold in the movie. All right, and in talking about the case back, let's talk about the movement they put in here. So inside this, you get the Seiko 6R51, which is just a no-date version of the 6R55. And I'll put the specs off to the side here again, like I did with the case. But you get 24 joules, it's got 21,600 vibrations per hour, a 72-hour power reserve, and a rated accuracy from Seiko of +25 to -15 seconds per day. And if I'm being completely honest, the movement here, it's just okay. That's probably the biggest disappointment with this watch, and I think for the retail price, this came out for like $1,600. I think they could have done better. I think they could have probably put like a 6L family movement in here that's thinner, and has better accuracy tolerances. It could have made the watch overall feel more refined, feel thinner, instead of being this chunky, large watch. But in actual use, I really don't notice it. The 72-hour power reserve is what I notice more, and it's honestly great. I can just throw this thing into my watch box, and then a few days later pick it up, and it's still ticking. I don't have to worry about resetting the watch. And if you're able to find one of these in like good used condition for a discount, honestly, I highly recommend it. But I don't know if I had to pay full price for this and I got this movement, I think I would be a little saltier than I am now with the watch. It's just one of those compromises that you come to expect with Seiko, and it's one of those compromises that you learn to live with, and it's honestly not that bad. Alrighty, let's talk about the strap now. The strap is produced by a leather working group certified tannery. And I actually really like this strap. Most of the times these Seikos get a bad rap for their straps, but this strap is very supple, especially towards the ends here, and a little bit stiffer as you get closer to the watch. And there's a subtle detail on it. There's an etched ohm, which again is like the monster in the movie. But the overall like style and feel of this strap just really complements the overall package of the watch. And it's one of those things that like you look at it and you think, oh, this strap is just a leather strap. But I like how purposeful it feels. It really feels appropriate to the watch because Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind is this movie about, fundamentally how humanity interacts with nature. It's about learning to live with the natural world instead of trying to dominate and destroy it. So I appreciate that Seiko didn't just throw a random, like, cheapo leather strap onto it. Instead, they went into the details, even with something as simple as the strap here, to really give the feeling and the vibe of the movie, even throughout the production of this watch. Alrighty, so for the wearing experience, I technically have it on backwards, but I don't know, it just really throws me off having the leather loop and the extra bit on this side compared to how it normally is here. But I would say even on like my tiny baby wrists, I'm like 5.5 to 5.75 inch wrists. It wears very comfortably. I don't know if you can see it, but there is like little to no gaps on the bracelet. And I'll get some other shots of it with me in like a different outfit and see like the side profile, but it is just such a comfortable watch. And the watch itself doesn't have to stay on this strap. It obviously has like the nice deployant buckle and stuff like that, but overall, like, you could put this on basically any type of leather strap, and I think it would look really good. I have this custom-made, like, dragon strap, and I'll throw up some videos and wrist shots of that, but that strap looks really, really good on this watch. The top grain leather to it just really makes it feel in tune with the movie, and obviously this being a Japanese watch, having the Asian-inspired art and the details on the strap itself just feels like it pairs well with this watch. And then I have this bund strap. I got it for like 15 bucks on Amazon, but that strap also makes this watch feel a lot more utilitarian, more adventurous, which again is so in theme with the movie. And it just makes it the larger case feel a lot more manageable. But this watch really you could pair on. I have some like vintage inspired straps. You could probably put this on a NATO and it would look good. I haven't tried like a bracelet, but I'm sure if you found like a titanium or a bead blasted bracelet or a mesh, this thing would look very good on that as well. So overall, very happy with how this watch wears. Alrighty, let's talk about my final thoughts on this watch. So I've been stalking this watch ever since Seiko announced it on their website back in 2024. For a long time, I wasn't sure if I actually wanted one. You know, the pictures online didn't really do it for me, and there were basically no reviews of the watch when it came out, and I remember seeing Teddy Baldessar's article on it, but outside of that, there really wasn't much information about this watch. So I hesitated on it, and honestly, I'm really glad I hesitated, because after owning it, I think I've come to appreciate this watch in a completely different way than I would have before. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. This watch is way too big at 40.5 millimeters. It's thicker than it probably has to be. The 6R51 movement is very underwhelming for the price. And I think the smaller case and higher end movement would have made this an objectively better watch and a 100% buy instead of a maybe, maybe not. But I absolutely adore this watch. And I can't say enough good things about it, because I still can't believe they're making watches like this for anime fans and for enthusiasts. And what impresses me the most is that they didn't take the easy route with this watch. They didn't just put Nausicaa, like the heroine, on the dial and call it a collaboration like they did with some of their Studio Ghibli watches. I'll throw up some pictures. They incorporated the movie into the overall design and aesthetics of the watch itself. From the blue enamel dial, the rugged bead-blasted case, the blue crystal in the crown, the golden case back, the prophecy inscribed on the case back, the strap, the ohm on the back of the strap. Every little detail feels like somebody involved in designing this watch actually loved and cared about the movie. And that's what makes it so special to me. This watch isn't trying to compete with a Grand Seiko. It's not trying to be an Omega. It's not trying to be a Rolex. It's doing something completely different. It's celebrating a movie, a story, a character, and the beginning of one of the most influential animation studios in the entire world. Because every time I look down at my wrist, I'm not just looking at a Seiko. I'm looking at a little piece of Nausicaa. And for an anime fan and a watch collector, I really don't think there's anything else that quite scratches the itch, such as this watch. Thank you.